Hey, everybody. Welcome
Hello.
back.
Hello.
So, yeah, this is Alex back again with Thomas.
Hey guys.
And we have a new guest, Brett.
Hello. Hey, thank you
Right
for
down
having me
here.
on.
Yeah, we can,
Right over
we can
here.
point to you in the thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, Brett, do you want to, we, in our first episode, we kind of went over our backgrounds and, who we were, are now still. Do you want to kind of go into, first off, just give us your elevator pitch about who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Elevator pitch. Okay. I'm a UX UI designer who works in generally smaller settings, working with clients on custom software. That's a lot of what I've been doing these days.
Cool. Okay.
Alrighty.
And
there's a sharper one in the drawer somewhere.
okay.
That's the gist.
Yeah. In the drawer somewhere, but you have to find it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how did you get into UX design? Where's your background before you got into it?
Mm-hmm.
I worked in entertainment for a few years. I was initially interested in trying to make a career out of screenwriting, and that means you go to Los Angeles and work as an assistant or something, maybe to a writer or in talent management or something, and lost interest in it as a job, as a kind of industry that I wanted to engage in. I still like writing, but I don't think in a professional setting, and I wanted to use maybe similar skill set. Went around, ended up doing some digital marketing stuff, and from there ended up here, more or less. So, doing ad design and things, and so doing a little graphic design, writing a little copy. I started learning about UX and moved some of the work I was doing closer to that, and started interviewing successful salespeople at our company to find out what worked for them, and maybe help spread the knowledge a little bit. So I ended up going into making some infographic type of stuff and putting out some video content too, and content wise, was creating a lot. And so I kind of became but anyway, I ended up going into stuff about how to keep motivated, which is very important for salespeople. How to be also good management practices and that kind of thing. So started focusing more on how to make effective salespeople than digital marketing per se.
So you found out about UX through your in the office space when you were of your past jobs.
So I was fortunate enough to that the nature of my work was that they could shift me around if they wanted me on something else. And so that's kind of what happened. I did some extra stuff on the side, and ended up doing more of that kind of stuff. And then ended up deciding to try and jump into UX by the bootcamp thing, which we all did. And so I kind of, I guess the story is, and ended up doing as much UX as I could get away with where I was, and then and had fun with that. One of the boot camp, had fun there, and now I'm here. I'm working in an agency, a small one, that and I like the people I work with too. I feel very.
That's good.
Lucky to be able to do that. And so now I'm doing I'm doing visual mock-ups, some testing as well, flow diagramming and that kind of thing, and sitting down with a couple developers talking about how if we include this feature, is this at all totally insane? And it's always great to just ask someone who's developing on development on the project, because you can get those answers real fast, right? So they can tell me, no, if you try and create this changes history mode, that's going to show you all, if you're making an in-browser app and you want history for changes you make to some data somewhere or something like that, for instance, right? That's showing historical changes you made is a much bigger challenge than just showing changes you made in the browser session, right? So for the for instance, so for the scope of the project, then yeah, it might be really nice to have historical changes. However, our task is not that primarily, and we can have a good enough of show within the browser session so you can double check, for instance. That's wow, cool. So we'll go with that feature and not waste a bunch of people's time by saying we should do this other thing, because you helped me out there. So that's great. Having those little conversations to guide your design is great. Developers have a lot to say, and then also talking to clients who are, in our case, have a lot of work that they are doing that is just their business. So they don't want they're not going into a career in IT or whatever. They want some bespoke software that helps them merge a lot of data, or get better qualified leads, or set a bunch of classes in a way that makes sense, and gives meaningful RSVPs and that kind of thing. And so a lot of improving those kinds of products has to do with sitting down with clients and going through what their grief is, if they have it, what works for them, and maybe throwing a couple of ideas at the wall too. And if we're sitting down with them about the next iteration of a software product we've developed for them, or maybe some web presence stuff or website stuff, if they're one of those clients, then we'll do that, and we'll put I'll make a mock-up of something, prototype it in InVision, and give them the cold read, sort of put it in front of them, ask them to do something simple, and see how far they get with it. Jump in when they're running into a prototype thing, a design thing, so prototypes have their own limitations. So give them the guidance that they would have automatically if it was a real program, I say, and then see where the real questions come up.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Brett. One of the things I noticed when we were doing kind of feedback with our concepts, when we were showing our concepts in their balsamic form, the really low res, and we put it in front of people, and since it was so black and white and lo-fi in a way, it was just gray, images were images were just squares with lines through them. Have any of your experience with putting prototypes like that in front of people? Was it any issue because in my past, the issue has been that the primary thing that people notice is how low res these prototypes are. So that's for a lot of people I tested before, is that it's hard for them to kind of get over that low res factor of these prototypes. Could you speak to anything about how you do that, how you kind of tackle that obstacle now?
I frame it as we're giving you a prototype that blocks out all of the visual distractions. So when you make these things, in the interest of time and when ideas are fluid, you don't spend too much on visual detail, because you want to get it through, and you also don't want to distract your own decision making process with colors or animations or other effects, unless it's like a really critical one, that will distract from like really the flow and like the overall task that you're trying to do.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I just say, hey, we got this exciting mock-up for you of that concept we discussed, and like here's where we're going at the next iteration. If you have some time today, let's sit down and tell me, how do you like this as compared to the previous version, or tell me how do you like it when you want to transfer data from this point from this source to this target, and something like that. And then what's the point? Oh, so you just give them the brief intro of, hey, we've got a we've got a function targeted prototype, or we've got a wireframe prototype that'll help us focus on flow testing, and then we can have another conversation about visual stuff. Almost always like people point out the prototype is something less than the thing.
From what I'm understanding, though, it seems like a lot of people can do that suspense of disbelief when shown those low prototypes. Okay, because you go out and frame it beforehand, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just this is a fast a prototype focusing on flow, and it's, I mean, like the truth is, you could make something that looks really nice if you wanted to. You just spend like a lot of time doing that, and then maybe you find out that you're not going with that design at all. So it really is the way to go with it, and I don't know, they say be about process, whatever, right? So like enjoy the process of, hey, I'm here with you testing this product, and we're getting our hands on it almost even, isn't that great?
Now, I actually have a question. When you talked about testing your products, it sounded like you were doing like faux user testing with the stakeholders to show them the product and be like, okay, well, this is what we're making you, this is how it will work, and like kind of walking them through.
Yeah, I hesitate to use even the word testing because, I think it's, what we do is not, So I've done the kind of testing you're talking about, where you want to make it, you want to keep things very controlled because you want your data to be meaningful. You want to reduce noise. You don't want to influence what people are saying, and you want like a large data set if you can get it. So you go and you sit with 10 or 15 people, and you get this thing. And like for the size of our thing, it doesn't make sense for me to be sourcing users that way. Like if you're gonna source, like I don't know, you could pay for a service that will give you some maybe cursory usage information about your product that you could have probably gandered at anyway without giving a few bucks to some people who aren't really interested in your product. You could go you could test a simple feature fast that way, see like where, or maybe see like what people are preferring to click on by getting some people online, some users online to test. But it doesn't come up that's worth investing 30 or 50 hours for us too often, unless the design is already kind of mature and there is something important to change that might affect like multiple clients or something like that, where we do really want to test, especially with people who don't have like a prior impression of this. But no, like we're not doing testing in the traditional sense because because of the kind of organization we are, the size we are. And it's much more like the direct conversation, and it's much more client is right. This is what the client wants, so we're going to build it for them. Because we're still as much a digital agency as doing I mean, I guess custom development falls under the umbrella of digital agency, but you could almost call us, a development company as well.
Well, it makes sense because it seems like you're working with like developers as well and other people from different expertise as well.
Kind of, yeah. So kind of an agency that does development stuff, and it has that as part of the skill set. And no, we don't. So yeah, I hope that that answers the question. I kind of cut you off there too, which I'm sorry about, Alex.
It's okay. It sounded like the answer was no. So that's,
Sure.
well, I guess my follow-up question to that would be like, what's your take on that? Is it something, would you want to do, not maybe necessarily like 15 people testing, but sort of a more focused like micro testing that like the Google Design Labs has started to talk about, where it's like you go, you make something, go out, poll like 3-4 people, and then come back and change it? Or do you think that because it's something that you're creating for the client, like you don't necessarily need research in that ecosystem?
Research.
You didn't name the company you work for, so I don't know if you want to like how vocal you want to be, if
Yeah, no worries if not.
Research is, I mean, it's always a good thing to do. You want to do that to get background done. I think I always do at least a good like first results scan of like the Google search results when I want to just see. Well, one big thing is maybe like a common design element for like a feature or something. Google results, okay, maybe, so like I'll maybe search this thing, go through either like forums results on how people are maybe tackling it, or maybe look at some content on Dribble or some other places, do a variety of things. But again, this is not like really directed research of like maybe, again, it's like how deep do we want to go? So I might find like an interesting white paper or something on some best practices for UX for this kind of digital product, and that will guide our stuff so that we know we're doing a lot of the right stuff that a lot of people have already figured out, and make sure we're going in the direction that we should go because of all that great knowledge. Then when it comes to, so it's just a size of organization thing. When it comes to, I don't know, doing maybe like something much more on our own initiative, like some consumer research or random testing or something like that. Again, it's just like, I'm a little bit of a researcher, but not in all the way researcher. So
it sounds like what you're saying is you do a lot of background research and pull from a lot of secondary sources, but there isn't so much, the user research and and research is really focused on the beginning part of the project and not so much on the middle and the end part. That's kind of what it sounds like to me you're saying.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's relying a lot on the client wishes
sure
as well. So that the wishes might not even require that research. Additional research,
I'd say like a little bit of research is a good standard practice for anything that you don't know everything about. Right. And we do probably more research at the start of a project than later, but do a little bit throughout, maybe for any idea that's percolating. But but we're not a research operation really. We're kind of an agency operation. But that stuff is kind of cool. So where I have been able to crunch some numbers or put some stuff together, and when it made sense, that was a lot of fun. So like I haven't done much like study design or collecting new data. I mean, I have done that. I've taken advantage of some of the meetups where you can go and test with everyone else, when it was something we felt was not too much of a risk of testing it with like the public or especially other designers, but for the most part, we're not. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I've tested stuff that way, but for the most part, it's more kind of like the most interesting way I've been able to get my hands on the data is the analytics stuff. So we do for some of our clients, catch them up on where they are for the digital presence stuff. We do some content for some clients as well. And so they need to be caught up on what they're getting for their money, and what kind of content works for them. So we show what kind of posts they posted in this period, and then here's their activity for this period, either the amount of impressions the post is getting, all the standard analytics stuff that's not necessarily, like you could be, any person might find themselves giving this kind of presentation, maybe an AdWords person or anything. But the point being is, getting our hands on our own data and even showing what we're doing. So not even testing, but kind of more of a like, here's the numbers that show what this is.
Okay.
And that's what's nice about that is the data's already there. So it's about finding what it's saying as best you know, and then organizing it. This is maybe a little rambly and not a direct answer to your question, but telling a story with data is maybe more of what I do than research.
Okay. Well, I'm just getting a notice from Zoom that it looks like we're running out of time. We've got like about 9 minutes. So I know from what it sounds like it sounds like your company is more of a production facility. So let me ask you, how does rapid prototyping factor into what you do as far as like when you make a product, do you make it in one form from beginning to end, or are you like making pretty major changes, moderate changes throughout the process?
Oh yeah, it's always moderate changes for sure. You could say it's made up of almost nothing than moderate changes, and it's impossible to know what it will become because the client doesn't even really know what they want it to become, for no fault of their own either. It's something you figure out together, and the service that you provide to them is not actually the physical or digital thing. It's kind of that service and being somebody who's on top of what they are trying to do, being on top of what your client is trying to do, on behalf of them. So you come out with this design in the early stages, and this kind of like is the product. Because there's not anything else. There's the ideas, but making the real thing takes a longer time, of course. And so you give them the prototype. You give them this information artifact, this mock-up or prototype, and this becomes the anchor around which you kind of have your conversations and provide your service. So now we have this anchor that's helping us orient our conversation and give them a visual idea of what they'll have. And it just makes it easier to provide the service for them. It makes them more satisfied too, which is great, because there's so much like unsung, especially talking to developers, unsung hard work, problems we solved for them that they didn't even know that they were going to have, and that it would be complainy to like tell them that we had to solve for them. And isn't it amazing that we took care of all these headaches for you? So like there's so much of that stuff they're never going to even know about. You won't even be able to brag about. So give them the prototype, right? And give them that feel good thing. It's honestly, yes, in comparison to the development, not that much work, and you're not giving them like a real thing, but you are providing the service better for them, which is why we've very jumped into this providing the prototype thing. It gets the client on board with the idea too. It helps them talk about it,
Because it gives them the framework, and it kind of guides them to the implementation part as well.
So like we produce content, we do web design, and we also have this service that is just like digital consulting almost. What is the digital presence you want, at least for the money that you're able to put out, And so it's kind of like we offer a service, and those artifacts support the service is kind of how I would say.
Great.
And how linked in are they as far as as you go through the process? Do they pretty much hand you the ball, you go through everything, and then you hand it back to them, or are they looped in along the way?
It depends on the project and the stage of the project. So in an early bespoke software project, yeah, that's much more upfront communication. In one where the engine, all the machinery is running in the way that we talked about, there's less checking in later. So the frequency depends on the kind of project, you know. I'd say but you know, we'll check in at least once a month for things like, let's say if you're, like, we've set up your web presence or whatever, and it's kind of running the certain way, then we'll give you the report monthly on it. And that always brings up a new idea or two. The stuff where we really interact would be, like, we have this problem with our leads where, like, we're getting them come in, but they have a lot of questions that they are also asking. So, like, while it's a lead, it's really more of a maybe lead. How do we qualify these leads? Okay, well, here's all the database stuff we have. Here's how you could make search filters to, like, for when people are looking at your products so that this information is already given to them. Like, then that stuff is like, that's like deep in the stuff, right? Because this is right where their client, where their target consumer or whatever, their ideal lead, this is where that comes from. This is the contact surface where things happen. So everything you do there, it has to be deep, because that's their business, you know.
Deep and detailed, extensive. Yeah.
Okay, well, I just have one more question for you. You know, when we interviewed, you know, when Thomas and I interviewed each other, we kind of talked about where we wanted to go with design, UX design, or whatever. So, you know, seeing yourself beyond this design consultancy, you know, the position that you're at now, where do you want to be in like 5-10 years, assuming that we all survive?
Oh, I don't know. Well, there's always interesting problems with, you know, out there. So yes, assuming we all survive, there's going to be all sorts of great survival related problems, like how much it's a good one.
So
how much time am I willing to spend on deciding my
would it be more like
delivery
research or more towards like a UX UI role? Yeah, just like what do you think about for those?
I think probably more in UX. I like doing the UI stuff too. I'm still at the point where I like doing both and haven't decided to specialize. And I don't know, you know what I always say is I like product companies. I like having a thing that you are familiar with and proud of and continue to build on and have like a very deep sense of how it works and all that, blah, blah, blah. And no one knows everything about everything. Really, you'll know a lot about your particular part of the project, etc. But yeah, I think, you know, either where I am now, but bigger, or somewhere else that's maybe a product company. I don't have like a grander vision than that, really. I just like, I like the work. I like working for the people that I work for, you know, and we'll see where that takes it. Maybe, you know, like one promising thing, I don't know if I see myself ending up here, but one very interesting thing that's going to be explored in the future is voice UX. If you think like that's really cool and you don't care about like making money or whatever, I bet like you could find your way into one of the IBM teams or something that's working on this. If that's what you really want to do. I haven't decided enough that that's like the hill I want to die on, but sure, that's
something. Yeah.
Okay, well, I love everything that I'm getting from you, but just to let you know, we're less than a minute, so thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Brett, for walking through everything with us and answering all our questions.
Thank you for your time, man. Really appreciate it.
Of course, it's a real pleasure. Well, yeah, anytime.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks.
All right.
Thanks again, and we'll see people who are watching next time. So.
All right.
Okay.
See ya.
Bye. Recording then. But yeah, right towards the end, you brought up the UXing the apocalypse, and I thought that was really, you know, if we, if we survive,
that'd be fun activity to talk about.
There's gonna be disaster management, man. I don't think the world's ever going to end, really. I mean, apocalypse is it's more of a change than an actual end, even in its own definition. But point being, wherever things go, there's going to be a lot more work to do managing, the disasters of the future, including, waste, environmental degradation, maybe overcrowding for urban centers, although that was interesting. Like the population overflow thing is not one of the things we're scared about anymore, because apparently populations seem to reach an equilibrium so far everywhere we've seen. Once you kind of achieve a certain quality of life, then you kind of focus on investing more, and that seems to be the pattern.
I read somewhere that in the 80s or so, that was like the peak point of human population, and it's been this is like a large scale, because I know people can point to like places like Japan or India for concentrated places, and Indonesia, but like in general, it's largely our human population is going down.
Well, somebody brought up something that really actually kind of scared me, is they said, because they were talking about like the baby boom and like everybody coming home from war and having babies. And then there was like, there's the Gen Z boom. Imagine how many babies are going to be coming from this being locked in your house for coronavirus. Like, I realized that and I'm like, oh my God.
Have you read the Expanse or seen any of the show? Yeah. So I thought that was kind of clever. For a while, I was like bragging on, because I saw the show first, and I was like, wait, there's 30 billion humans at this time, but everything we know, because they're supposed to be so hard science, is everything we know about population dynamics suggests that this would not happen, right? And then, but then in the books, they go into it, no, it's because of basic, apparently. So in this future world that they imagine, resources are so abundant by now that they can provide everyone with free clothing, shelter, food, legal recreational drugs even. And the issue is not this, it's more like spiritual malaise. It's like all this stuff has been provided for, and there's no need to like
working for it in a way.
Yes, there's no challenge. There's, desire is completely different. It helps to have something you need to do to help yourself. So now no one has anything to do, and so they just have children, was the idea. So the earth becomes overpopulated because they actually get too good at providing for everybody.
Yeah.
So
everyone's bored, so you just sleep with each other.
Imagines, so it's making the argument that like a little bit of struggle is maybe good implicitly, or I don't know. Anyway, it's just saying, when people have nothing else to do, they
offer it. Shows like that, I think it's interesting because it shows like a unique combination of things that might not ever happen in reality, but it shows like, hey, that could happen somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and it's also too, a lot of people, don't really understand the difference between eustress and distress. They think that like, if something's hard for you, then it's distressing. But in reality, like eustress is that kind of like that hard for you that's good, and that like enriches you as a person, physically, emotionally.
That's just that effort that gives back to you instead of just takes from you.
Yeah, and one of the things that I find really interesting too is like bringing this back to like the sort of UX spectrum, is people talking about like how like the damage that systems can be if they're too easy to use. And the fact of like, people talk a lot about Apple and how it's like super user friendly. And the reality of the situation is like, that might not be a good thing. Like it might be good for you to have to like take the extra step, when you're creating a task flow for somebody and you want them to, this goes into the dark pattern thing. Like if you want them to consider it before they like keep going, then you make it a little bit harder to do. versus like if you want it to be, if you want to like trick somebody into spending that $5 or whatever, signing up for the free trial, then you sort of grease that system so that it happens really quickly.
Would you mind putting that in a concrete example, Alex?
Yeah, like if you, for example, like Crunchyroll is a great example where, when you're watching a show, you click on a show to watch, and then it prompts you to hit the button to watch the show is like an X button, and then if you want to watch the show without ads, and like if you want to watch it with ads, then you have to change the button that you're hitting and hit the square button. But if you want to sign up for a free trial, then you hit the same button that you hit to get to that point.
All right, so it gives you like that extra step.
People. Yeah, it's trying to trick people into doing that by making it like part of like, oh, well, just hit the same button and it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like other people, when you're prompting up, like, are you sure? Are you sure? Do you want to do this? That's kind of like where you're like slowing down that process. But yeah, so sometimes, it's like the people with the iPhones and, in-app purchases, those kids were spending $20,000 of their parents' money just because it was so easy to buy stuff.
Yeah, I think it's leveraging how streamlined a tax flow can be.
Yeah,
for sure, exactly. Making it easy for people. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and just having to understand as a UX designer that like sometimes you want to make things harder and sometimes you want to make things easier, and it's just a matter of like behavioral design, figuring out where you go on that spectrum.
What was the initial question again? I forget.
I don't think we had a question. We were just talking about.
I don't think it was a question either. We were just jumping off each other's ideas.
Yeah,
I mean, whatever comes to mind from it, really.
Yeah, we were talking just about how an easy, task flow, or how some like eustress and distress, like some things can be good that they're hard. And
yes, that's right. That was eustress and distress. I don't know this word, eustress.
Yeah,
I like it though. Yeah, the idea that. Sorry, continue.
No, eustress is just basically like healthy exercise. Whereas like distress is the kind of thing that like, if your body is constantly under physical strain, it will start to like affect your joints. It'll start like your body isn't profiting.
Like weariness, I would say.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, this eustress thing is something, eustress versus just stress, or even.
Well, that's the thing.
Distress, maybe like the. When does how does it become one? How does it become the other, right? And I think there's a lot of probably futile stress people will encounter in using software that's unnecessary, but will probably happen. So how do you how do you minimize that, and how do you make people's challenges as rewarding as you can? The whole video game thing. It's like you see how pissed off people are playing video games a lot of the time, and it's like, why do you play this? And it's just, but when you achieve that goal, it's like all of that stress is converted into happiness somehow, and this was what you were trying to do the whole time, right? So I think it was kind of almost in this state of futile stress up until you succeed. It could have been futile stress. It could have been perceived that way and integrated into your mind that way, and then become like generate avoidant behavior, etc. But in this case, no, like you sort of conquered the stress or whatever, and then you realize there's a reward at the end of it, and hopefully that challenge was something meaningful, like editing a really good photo or solving some difficult problem.
And as long
how do you give somebody that chance at reward, but for a meaningful challenge? So in the case of Photoshop, it's you get this beautiful picture, right? But how do we make sure that that's at the end of the tunnel for somebody? And that's hard. You can't really make sure you can kind of sow your fields as fertile as you can, or whatever.
Exactly. And I think it's all about kind of like, because I think you're speaking to Brett, like the end goal is that beautiful picture on Photoshop or so. And one way to kind of lead users to that kind of from point A to point B being that nice picture, being that along the way, each step is communicated. Just going back to Photoshop again, because I have it on my computer, is that the tasks that you want to complete, they are done usually through like the tools like erase, brush, warp, things like that. And it's good that for Photoshop they have a visual representation of those tools that you can use to get to that point B. That'd be the kind of example I would use of how effective ways to kind of guide people from point A to point B to that end goal. Because a lot of the times, the question would be that I don't know how to get to point B, and this software isn't showing me where I am, how close I am to step B as right now, or how like the steps I need to get to even getting closer to a nicer picture as well. Yeah. So that's definitely some way.
Oh, sorry. This is why and I hope they're considering this. I'd say like a whole big chunk of Adobe's UX is their help UX, which has gotten like really great in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the little help search bar or whatever, or you click help, and I think they'll let you search features in Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
Keyword search, so it will show you when you search a given term. If it's in their drop downs, it'll open up the drop down and show you like the highlighted feature in the drop down, so it'll save you time that way. But so that's one thing. That's amazing. That must have been so crazy hard to make, maybe, and it's great. But the other thing, the other part of this is the forums. So with Photoshop, you like more than half the time, at least for me, are looking up things, how to do things, usually like combinations of different.
And that would be on like the Adobe forums?
Yes, so the forums are really great. And there's just a lot of people posting on them, frankly, is, well, the advantage, but
yeah.
But is that any accident? I mean, that's a reflection of how big their user base is, sure, but also like, so how do you, but you know, their team should be thinking about how to keep people attracted to these forums, because this makes your product usable. You know, there's way too much stuff for you to write to explain this stuff. So let the users help themselves, right? Well, and this is what makes the Adobe product so great. Even if there's something more complicated in an Adobe product, you can look up how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a total coup. You know, that will maintain that market dominance, you know, forever, as long as you're able to do that. Sorry. I get my long-winded things too sometimes.
Well, what I was going to say is that that's a lot like how Apple started out as having this, like, you know, this being this personal computing company, but having this like rabid community of fans that was a support system. So for me, I kind of imagine it like it's you have the product in the center, and around that you sort of have this bubble of users that is like kind of part of the product, but not part of the product.
It seems like you might be alluding to the aspect of the Genius Bar. In fact, that like there's a lot of Apple stores around the world, around the country there, where you can go there and have a set type of squad to help you.
But it's interesting because the Genius Store is something that's through the actual organization, and I feel like that factors more into sort of the consumerist, like, you know, we want to be the ones helping you. We want to be the ones in control of the situation. Whereas like Apple at the beginning and the Adobe community, a lot of that is just like people helping people out.
Oh, okay, I see that.
Yeah, so like I'm wondering, you know, because it is a question of like when you're bringing out a new platform, obviously that community is not going to be there, but like potentially as part of the, you know, customer experience design, you know, planting seeds that community can grow around, you know, maybe like having events, maybe doing like, you know, outreaches, web platform, you know, like webinars where you can like teach people how to use things and like just engage the community more.
It's about creating that community.
Yeah.
You know what would be kind of a super sweet idea that is totally out there is have you ever had this like experience where you're working with Photoshop, some other graphic design program, and like you come up with this like really cool idea, right? People should know this. This is a cool trick I found. You know, but there's the whole activation energy barriers, so to speak, of well, getting the energy to find the right recording program, the right energy to frame the stuff on your windows right, the energy to collect your thoughts and speak right, the energy to edit it and post it, the whole thing. You know, what if you made this energy very low? Like, make a little button or something, helpful prompt, some contextual state that gets activated where people have the opportunity to record them doing a cool thing. So like show like some kind of generic publish to Adobe Live thing, say, where like you can quickly in like some nice easy compressed video record yourself doing this trick.
Yeah, like in software, like in-house recording software. So maybe the button could be perchance on top or even in the sidebar right there when you're working, doing your other things you want to do as well. Either way.
Yes, and so now you have you've engaged with the community, you've helped other people, you know, and more of this stuff is out there for you too.
Yeah, I think it all relies back on packaging that information in a human-centric fashion as well, not keeping it as humanless forms with just Q&As from the company. Of course, have that injection of humanity in it. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, it's really funny, and I gotta take it here again. Is TikTok? There's so much where people are just like sharing how to do things, and like it's really interesting because their bar of interaction is very low because you can just start recording. Like you don't need to have a sound, you don't need to have anything else. Like you just start recording your life, but then also at the same time, it entertains these people that are putting like 20 hours into editing one video. And I think Adobe is a lot like that, where you can have, you could do simple stuff with it and it'll support that simplicity, but like it also is a robust enough platform that if you go in there and you want to like, individually visualize the atoms in like a photo that you're doing, like you can do that potentially. So yeah, it has that like full spectrum of usability from beginner to expert.
Actually, and also pulling to that, pulling back from Photoshop again. If you look at it, it's kind of dense, and right away, for me, from speaking from my experience when I started Photoshop, it was in some ways hard to start out. Like I definitely rely on this creative community from Adobe and people who like Adobe products to understand my handle of it. And I couldn't help but thinking that there's an aspect of feeling accomplished just working with more of this kind of robust looking interface. Basically what I'm saying is that there is an attractiveness to be able to say, yeah, I finally understand this interface, but that might not be consumable the first time I interacted with it. So
yeah,
that's an aspect to think about as well.
Yeah,
to believe there's a payoff in learning this.
Like I know this. It's cool to say that now I know how to work this interface, even though the buttons to like for example on the Photoshop, the buttons that I want to make things start right away. For example, create an artboard, get a brush out, something like that. It's not hanging in front of my face. It's something I have to look for a little bit while just simply interacting with it. So there's a kind of intrinsic reward to that, which I would say falls under the category of eustress.
Yeah, but that's also like one of the really important parts of the community is because like if you imagine working with something like Photoshop, right, and all you have to work with is just what's given with the program, and you try to do something, you can do some pretty simple stuff at the get-go without having very much training. But once you hit that like first section where you hit that like that major difficulty, odds are you're not going to have the fortitude to be able to like push through and keep learning. Like you're going to fall off, you're going to get frustrated with it, and you're going to step away and you're not going to continue that learning. But the community reaching out to the community and being supported by other people, helping you out, and like it helps to carry you through that like middle area where you're like learning it and being frustrated, but like also being able to do more. And yeah, I mean, it's really good for you to be able to hit that peak and then have somebody to catch you